There is a specific kind of person who is currently drowning. But ask them how they are. They will say fine every single time. Not because they are lying, but because they genuinely do not know any other answer. That person might be Gen X, or that person might be you. And I want to talk about why. Because the psychology behind this is not a personality trait. It is not stubbornness. It is not coldness. It is a survival system built inside a child who had no other choice. Think about a child 8 years old coming home from school to an empty house. No parent waiting. No one asking how the day went. Just silence and a key around their neck. This was not dramatic neglect. This was not abuse. This was Tuesday. This was just life for millions of children born between 1965 and 1980. They called them Latchkey kids because they carried their house key, like a small adult who already learned that nobody was coming home soon. Now here's what most people miss. When a child's brain develops without consistent emotional availability, something specific happens neurologically. Psychologist Bruce Perry, who spent decades researching childhood developmental trauma, found that a brain under chronic stress does not break. It adapts. It begins to rewire itself to need less, to expect less, to feel less. Not because the child chose this, but because the brain protects itself from a disappointment that keeps arriving on schedule. So imagine that child, again, every day they come home alone. Every day they handle their own problems. Every day they figure things out without being taught how. And slowly, without anyone saying the words out loud, they form a belief that follows them for the rest of their life. Nobody is coming to save you. So you better save yourself. This is where it gets important. That belief did not stay in childhood. It moved with them into their 20s, into their marriages, into their workplaces, into how they raised their children. And here is the part nobody is talking about. It became a silent inheritance. Their children watched them handle everything alone. Never ask for help, never show when something was wrong. And those children learned the same lesson without a single word being spoken. We call it strength, but the nervous system calls it hypervigilance, and it is being passed down right now in homes across the world to a generation that never even heard of latchkey kids. Psychologist Mary Ainsworth spent years studying how early caregiving shapes adult attachment. What she found was that children who grow up with emotionally unavailable caregivers most often develop what she called dismissive avoidant attachment, which means as adults they unconsciously push away closeness not because they do not want it, but because their nervous system has learned to treat intimacy like a threat. Let me give you a real example. Imagine a woman named Sandra, 47 years old, successful career, 2 kids, a husband who loves her. And when her husband tries talking about how she is really feeling, she changes the subject. When her kids need emotional support, she gives them solutions instead. When a friend tries to get close, she finds a reason to pull back. Sandra does not see the problem. She thinks she is strong. She thinks she is handling things. What Sandra does not realize is that she is still that 8-year-old girl coming home to an empty house, deciding that needing people is too expensive a habit to keep. And her children are watching her do it right now. This is the psychology of Gen X. And it goes deeper than emotional detachment. Gen X watched institutions fail them publicly and repeatedly. Watergate taught them that the people in charge will lie to your face. The AIDS crisis, ignored by the government for years, taught them that your life can be at stake, and the people who should care simply will not. The economic recessions that gutted their parents taught them that stability is never given to you. It is something you fight for alone. By the time Gen X grew up, the distrust was not personal. It was structural, it was logical, it was earned. Alan Shore, one of the leading researchers in affect regulation and brain development, found that early emotional environments shape not just behavior but the actual neurological architecture of how we process and regulate emotion. For Gen X, that architecture was built in a low-warmth, high-independence environment, which means the emotional regulation tools that most people develop through connection. Many Gen X adults never fully developed, not because they were weak, but because nobody was there to teach them. Here's the part nobody talks about. The same traits that make Gen X look unbreakable on the outside are quietly costing them everything on the inside. The hyper-independence that got them through childhood makes it almost impossible to ask for help as an adult even when they are drowning. The self-sufficiency that made them survivors makes them feel like a burden the moment they have a genuine need. The distrust that protected them from betrayal also keeps them at a distance from the people who are actually safe. They built a wall to survive and then forgot they were the ones living behind it. There is a particular loneliness that comes from this. Not the loneliness of no one around, but the loneliness of having people around and still feeling completely alone. Because connection requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires trust. And trust for someone raised to need. Nobody feels less like safety and more like handing someone the exact thing they need to hurt you. Think about someone you know right now who seems completely fine all the time, who handles everything alone, who deflects every sincere question with a joke or a subject change, who seems almost allergic to being taken care of. That person is not cold. That person is not broken. That person learned very early that needing people had a cost they could not afford, and they have been paying in a different currency ever since. Here is what research actually shows us. The need for connection never disappears. It gets suppressed, it gets managed, it gets buried under decades of being competent and capable and fine. But Alan Shore's research shows that suppressed attachment needs do not dissolve. They surface as chronic stress, as relationship patterns that repeat as a background hum of emptiness that no amount of self-sufficiency can silence. So what do you do with this? If you are Gen X, or if you love someone who is the first thing to understand is this: the independence was never a personality trait. It was a survival strategy adopted by a child who had no other option. And survival strategies do not need to run forever. The generation that was raised to need nobody has spent decades proving they can handle everything alone. They have proven it. The point is made. What they have not yet tried is discovering what life feels like when you do not have to. There is something quietly extraordinary about a generation this broken and this strong at the same time. They were handed almost nothing emotionally and built entire lives from it. They were ignored by the culture, overlooked by the media, squeezed between generations that got all the attention, and they kept going without asking for credit, without expecting applause, without needing anyone to notice. But here's the thing about people who are used to no one noticing. Sometimes the most powerful thing is simply being seen. If you grew up with a key around your neck, or if you are the person who is always fine, I want to ask you one question. What is the one thing you wished someone had noticed back then? Tell me in the comments, because being seen is the first step to coming home.